is a integration of three main things. A philosophy, a way of looking at the world, a methodology, a way of doing things, and then a set of offerings that is derived from both that philosophy and the methodology. So let's start with a philosophy. A philosophy is a way of looking at the world and explaining it. And so we have looked at the main explanations that we have in psychology for why people do what they do. And these fall into three main aspects. Firstly, the behavioral. So behavioral philosophy is all about the implementation of consequences on people's behavior. And what we know is that depending on how your behavior is reinforced, both positively or negatively, you are more or less likely to have that behavior occur again. And so the behavioral approach is all about consequences that are applied to increase or decrease behavioral outcomes. It's all about actions. Secondly, we have cognitive psychology, which is a philosophy of the way we think, the way that we make decisions, and the way that we interpret our world through interpretation and processing of information. And so cognitions is everything that happens inside of your head. It is everything in terms of thought processes, beliefs, values, attitudes. And so what we have found out is that it is these beliefs, values, and attitudes, or these cognitions, that actually drive how we behave. And so in the cognitive approach, we are very concerned with having an impact and having a change in the way people value and believe, rather than just on how they behave, because we see the link between the way they think and the way they behave. So the action is the result of cognition, whereas in a behavioral approach, action is the result of action. And so cognition is what comes after. Let me repeat that. Behavioral approach is all about the consequences. And so if you do something repeatedly over time, it was thought initially, this is going back to the 70s, that your behavior would change the way you thought. It would dictate your cognition. What we know now is that it is actually the other way around. Your cognitions, or your beliefs and values, dictate how you behave. And so it's a major shift from where we were in the 70s to where we got to in the 80s and ongoingly. What we're beginning to realize, however, is that behavior is multifactorial, that it isn't just one way or the other way, that some things are ruled by behavioral approaches and some things are ruled by cognitive approaches. Which brings me to the third approach, the social approach, which is all about the understanding how humans are social beings. We work out how to behave according to social norms, and these social norms are unwritten, and they are informal, and they are norms that we are not formally trained on. We actually pick these norms up from our environment and from our social context. We pick the cues from the social context. We all know how to behave when we enter an elevator. In Western society, the social norm for lift behavior is to go into this elevator and ignore everyone in it. Right? Nobody ever sat us down and said, this is what you must do. However, we know that this is what's expected. And so there are many elevators in the workplace. There are many situations that are akin to that, where we know what is expected of us, although it isn't necessarily what's written down anywhere. And what tends to happen is that in the workplace, most of the behavior that takes place according to social norming rather than the rules, processes, and procedures of an organization. What we have in DuPont is something quite atypical, which is our social norms are almost identical to what is in our processes and our procedures manuals. And if you deviate from these processes and procedures, the social context very quickly interacts with you, and you are very soon find out what the social context will not tolerate. For example, going down a set of escalators without holding the handrail. It is possible that if you were to do that, most likely someone within DuPont would come to you and in a very friendly way remind you that in DuPont we hold that handrail. That is a social norm. That is an unwritten rule. That is also a safety rule. And so it's kind of like a way of reinforcing what is required and what is expected in an informal way. And so understanding and being able to harness the power of that social context and be able to influence the social context of our clients becomes also very important. And so they're the three main philosophies that underpin DnA. And what we find is that the combination of these three philosophies together provide an output which is much greater than the individual parts.